All right. Good morning. So, welcome, Mr. Merrill.
Yeah, hello.
All right. So, we'll start off with your high school career.
Yeah.
Talk about cross country in the fall.
Yeah. So I went to a small boarding school in Massachusetts, Cushing Academy. My mom worked there for almost 30 years. Ran cross country in the fall. Mr. Ince was my coach, this guy from Trinidad and Tobago. Our cross country team was actually like three-time defending New England champions, and I ran JV. But I got to witness some of the best runners I think I've ever seen.
Mhm.
And that's what really motivated me. Made varsity my senior year as the seventh runner. So I don't know if you know, in cross country, you get seven runners on varsity. Five of them score, and then the other two are kind of alternate. So if one of them drops out, then the other two like move on. And in fact, in my first cross country race, two runners, the first varsity cross country race my senior year, two runners dropped out during the race. One of them ran into a tree. I'm dead serious, and broke his shoulder. The other one passed out of heat exhaustion. So here I am, seventh place, last place, like in the race,
Yeah.
seventh on my team. And I'm looking, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's Matt. Oh no.
Mhm.
Oh, there's the other Matt. Oh no. And my score ended up counting despite me finishing last. But that was I ran for 4 years. Loved every second, was captain my senior year. Um, and then of course played two other sports, basketball and baseball as well during that.
Okay. So, you learned some stuff from cross country. Are there any like life lessons that you took away from that specific sport?
Um, Good question. I'd say for me it was like the idea of perseverance. So you for me it was I was never a fast runner.
Okay.
I was durable, never missed a race. But it was the idea like when you are running in the middle, and it was something that I'm sure we'll touch on later on. When I was in college, it's like when you're in the middle of a race, you are by yourself. There's no music in your ears. It's just you and your thoughts, and it's like learning how to turn off the noise and just be in the moment,
Hmm.
and how that leads to persevering through hardship. In that case, like your legs are on fire because you're running, right? That's probably the big thing that I try now to apply in my life is like when you're in the middle of whatever it is you're going through, like keeping your head down and keep going.
Okay. We'll go to basketball. I know that that became something super important for you,
Yeah.
and like, you coached that sport, had a lot of thoughts on there, even when you weren't coaching about, oh, this is what I think about this team or that
Mm.
team, as we discussed. So I was just curious about what sparked your interest in basketball in your high school playing career.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been playing basketball for pretty much my whole life. I remember my parents signed me up for the Fitchburg Rec League, and I was playing with, I mean, I was like the worst player on my team, right? But I was kind of lanky, so they had me on there. But when I got to high school, uh, I played kind of the third tier, so like a freshman level, for 2 years. In prep schools, your varsity team are kids who are going Division One or two, so they're kind of the cream of the crop. I mean, I got to see a couple of guys who played in the NBA, on my varsity team.
Wow.
So your JV level is kind of the public school varsity. So my junior and senior year, I played JV, but we went around, we played, varsity teams, like local teams. Um, and we played other prep schools, JV teams as well. Um, and that was really what sparked my passion for it. My coach my junior year was Mr. Wenning, and him and I are very close. So he has a son who I am 3 years older, or 3 days older than, who actually is on had is autism, but I'm Cody, and so I've been very close with Mr. Wenning for quite some time, because of the connection that Cody and I have. But he was my coach, and I was always kind of, they called me the garbage man because I took out the trash. I would score 10 points and pull down 7 rebounds and take 3 charges. So basically the opposite of what the Celtics do, that's how I would put it. And so in there, I'm learning just that toughness and learning My role is not to score 30. My role is not to score 20. My role is to set as many hard screens as I can, to be the anchor on the defense, and rely on the other four to carry the load of scoring. You know, we had this kid Elijah, who was a freshman, and I think I was a senior this year, he was a bucket. I mean, step back threes, you know, up fakes and drives. And my job was to get him open. So we had a system where if he was in the corner, I'm setting a pin down screen for him then to roll off and either go to the basket or pop out for three.
Yeah.
And then if he gets the ball, I'm sealing my guy looking for it, but it's really kind of a decoy. It's meant to get the guys collapsing because I've just sealed my man. I'm now open to the basket,
Gotcha.
and that might open him up a little bit more. And then my job's to clean up the boards.
Yeah.
Right. And then we had another kid, Chris Kirby, kind of the chunkier kid, but another bucket. And you know, and him and we became good friends, but I would get rebounds and the amount of times I kicked out to him for three, you know. But to kind of like, you know, talk about a life lesson there. It's like, you know your role, you know. You know, it was kind of do your job before do your job, which was cool.
All right, baseball.
Yeah.
So
I actually got cut my freshman year from baseball. I was a catcher at the time. The depth chart of catcher for JV. I mean, the depth chart for catcher was they already had 3 catchers, and so they couldn't take on a 4th. And I joined the outdoor club. I was going to do rock climbing and zip line and stuff. And Mr. Shushnik pulled me in. He was my math teacher. Pulled me in like a week after. I remember I was crushed because baseball was my favorite sport growing up.
Yeah.
I played little league, and my dad. I mean, I would go regularly. We had this like semi-pro team, Worcester like Tornadoes or something. I would go watch them. But my freshman year, I got cut. Shushnik came in and about a week later said, "Hey, like, so a kid dropped out, didn't want to play anymore. He's an outfielder. How do you feel about? We're going to put you on the team. We're not sure how much you're going to play, but you know you'll play." And this team had pretty much all your JV. The varsity team never took freshmen. If you were a freshman, then you were a draft pick. We had a kid who the Yankees looked at. You know, he was as a freshman. He was playing. Tim Cassidy. He played, you know, up at varsity, and he swung down to JV to get like some innings of pitching and some time at first. So I was kind of the stat guy. I kept track of the book, the old school scorebook. Sophomore year is when I really took off because I waited my time. This team, the majority of the guys on JV were on varsity the next year, and that team the year after, so my junior year, won the championship, won the New England championship. My sophomore year, I played very well. I batted 5th. I think I had a 4-something batting average. I played in the outfield. My junior year, I didn't go on the preseason trip, so I had to play JV one more year. There was a rule, Mr. Hancock, Coach Hancock had a rule. We did a Florida trip. So during spring break, the whole baseball team would go for a week down in Delray Beach, Florida.
Yeah.
We would play teams from all across the world. We talk in 3 games a day, you know, and you had both JV players and varsity players went. But the rule was you couldn't make varsity if you didn't go on because you're talking 1st and 3rd situations, working on every little play that could get thrown on, right? And you need time to build that in. And when you're in the Northeast, as you know, from just finishing your baseball season, a rain delay could throw everything off. Or, you know, and we're playing baseball with snow on the ground, you know? So we need that time. And so because I didn't go my junior year, I had to stay down at JV one more year. And then my senior year, I got moved back behind the plate. I was the backup catcher. Backup catcher's responsibility is to be the starting catcher on JV. And then I got some time at varsity as well. But you know, baseball became kind of just a steady sport for me. And I played not to get any varsity time. I played because I loved the game. And that was the other thing, kind of another life lesson that I learned in high school was just, you're going to do things because you love it, not because you want the recognition. I had one at bat as I have one varsity at bat my entire career. I was 1 for 1. I had a seeing eye single right up the middle against Worcester Academy, you know. So those are kind of my high school experience of athletics.
All right. So moving on, you chose St. Joe's for your college.
Yeah.
Why'd you pick that?
Yeah, so I had a college counselor named Mr. Henry. So in prep schools, you don't have just a guy, you don't really have guidance counselors. You have a counseling department, who I saw a lot. And then you had college counseling. So these were people who their sole job was to learn colleges. Mr. Henry was a guy. Do you know the Princeton Review at all? Or like whatever those books that have like write-ups of or a website that has write-ups of every college imaginable. He was a walking like Princeton Review. He knew every college. He would wear different college sweatshirts every day. Like he was that kind of a guy. Like his whole career was learning about colleges. And I was very fortunate that he was like the director of the whole department. I was very fortunate that he was my assigned college counselor. And my first meeting with him was my spring term sophomore year. And he said, "So what are you thinking about going to college?" I said, "I want an adult version of Cushing. I want to be a name, not a number." I listed off all the things I want. And he looked at me dead in the face. And he said, "St. Joe's, Maine." I said, "Nah." So I was looking at other colleges. I looked at Notre Dame. I looked at, because I'm like, turned out he was right. St. Joe's for me was the perfect size, beautiful campus. And I had an opportunity to run cross country during that. So I was choosing between there and actually Southern New Hampshire. Southern New Hampshire just became too big for me. I wanted somewhere where I would have a group of friends, where I knew all of my college counselors, and then eventually got to know my coach. I ended up working in the athletic office, kind of as a administrative assistant in there. So I got to meet with the athletic director regularly. You don't do that in larger colleges, you know. So yeah, that's why I picked it.
All right. So let's talk about sports in college.
Yeah.
So let's go through cross country.
Yeah. So cross country, I ran for, I call it 3.5 years. So I basically medically couldn't continue to run my senior year. Plus I was student teaching my senior year. So halfway through that season, but I ran, I think I have the third most races run in school history. Or something. I would have had the most if I finished. I was the Ironman. And so my coach for 3 years was Ray Putnam, who I think is now a Division II coach somewhere. And he was hard, but he pushed me, and we got into I was a hothead my freshman year, and I did not take it to his coaching. But he allowed me to him being tough on me allowed me not to get away with stuff that I thought I could. So once you get to college, you think you can do whatever you want. So I remember I was 3 minutes late for a practice, and he was like, "You owe me 3 extra miles." Like he was that kind of a guy. And I originally thought, who are you to say that? But eventually, you kind of you realize like he's the coach for a reason, and I got to start doing what the team needs. My sole job, we had a small cross country team. My job was he knew that I was a guaranteed guy on the starting line, so he didn't have, we had 9 guys, our first year, I think we had 9 or 10 guys, my sophomore year, we ended up blowing up to about 12 guys my junior year, but injuries happened throughout a college season. I was able to always, he only had to worry about 6 runners, not me. If that makes sense. And then he left after my junior year. So we had Tom Dan, who's a professor there, who coached for 20 years before. And he was our coach. Unfortunately, because of student teaching in the fall, instead of in the spring, like most colleges, we did ours in the fall. I was doing my workouts at like 5 o'clock in the evening. So like think about 5 o'clock in the evening in November or October, like nighttime. So I was running through our course And I just had to rely on like night vision pretty much to get through my workouts. And then couple that with my knee and hip problems. Eventually him and I met and both agreed, not at practice at all. I'm working on teaching, right? I'm basically full-time teaching. I just didn't have the flexibility, both physically and like just schedule wise, to continue to run. So I stayed around the team. I helped out where I could. I was like kind of the groundskeeper for our course during our we hosted our conference championship. But I enjoyed my time there. One of our top runners, our captain Joe. I was in his wedding. He was in my wedding. We're very, very close friends still. There was a very much a camaraderie there because majority of us when it came in as freshmen.
Yeah.
And so for 4 years, those were my guys.
So when the career comes to an end and you're all done with athletics, what was that feeling for you?
The thing that I've learned is every person, there's a last day of everything. And it's hard to think that way. My conversation with Coach Dan, that was the moment I realized I'll never I thought I would never competitively do anything ever again.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate my junior and senior year in the spring. My freshman, sophomore year, I ran track. I threw the javelin and I ran. I did indoor my freshman year, just outdoor my sophomore year. My junior year in the spring, I ended up taking on a varsity assistant baseball job in Gray, New Gloucester, small town, small Class B school, so Division II, if you will, here. And I was the hitting / like catching coach.
All right.
And so when I found out I was no longer going to be able to compete, my senior year, I already had a year of coaching under my belt. Came back to do that the spring term of my senior year, and I was doing after student teaching. I got hired as a part-time teacher at school I student taught at. I had 5 bachelor's courses that I had to finish in order to graduate, and I was coaching. I did not have a social life in the spring term of my senior year. Most other seniors, they're out having a good time. They have internships lined up. They got jobs lined up. I don't think I talked to anyone my spring term.
That must have been isolating.
A little bit. The guys who were in my suite, my closest friends, I was a ghost to them because I was up at 4 getting ready and I wasn't coming back until, after dinner. But I did it primarily because, like, as much as I enjoyed my time at college, and I think people should have a good time, however they do it at college. Like, I was there to set up the rest of my career, and I was doing stuff I love. I burnt out, but I was doing stuff I loved, and I luckily, my outlet ended up being both coaching, played some ultimate frisbee, and we can touch on that later. That became kind of my avenue to get some competitiveness in.
I got a bunch of questions that I'm thinking of now.
Yeah.
So you talked about at Cushing how like it was set up so you'd have like your New England championships or whatever, and that was a prep school. And here we have like our Division I, Division II, Division III, Division IV championships for the state. So so is it because there's fewer prep schools, they do it for the whole region?
Yeah, so the whole region, it's not necessarily because there's fewer prep schools, it's actually hundreds. And there are classes there, I honestly forget what the class, it's like class, I think it's class AA, like that kind of a thing. So when you think about New Hampshire, the prep schools in New Hampshire, right? You have Proctor, you have New Brunswick, I think it's New Brunswick, Phillips Exeter, St. Paul's.
Yeah.
Who else? You can't have the 4 of them just in a league together. Massachusetts has tons. And so and I think it's built out of like tradition. You would play each other. So there's specific conferences that some schools belong to. My mom coached volleyball for years and softball. She's actually one of the founding members of New England's women's volleyball league.
Yeah.
She has the copy of the original charter.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, from like the 80s. Because they realized like, oh, we need to create this sport. It was originally in the spring, but they would split time with the boys because boys volleyball is in the spring. And they were the ones who decided, why don't we put it in the fall? Because all the gyms are available in the fall. Baseball hasn't, or basketball hasn't started. You really don't have this like because you're in some usually smaller schools. I mean, my school was 400 kids. You played 3 sports, or you did, and you had to do an afternoon activity. You couldn't just go to school and then go back to your dorm room. I mean, we're talking boarding school.
Yeah.
From 3 to 5, everyone was in an afternoon activity. So, that's why it's not to go on a tangent, but
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And then as far as college goes and how that's set up, is that similar with the different classes? Like, I'm not really sure how that's
yeah.
set
So
up.
in college, it depends, right? So we know the NCAA.
Yeah,
We also have the NAIA, which is a completely different national college thing. St. Joe's used to be part of the NAIA, and they're considered a smaller version of the NCAA. Most colleges, though, as we know,
or NCAA.
NCAA. You then take NCAA, you have Division 1, 2, and 3. Division 1 is the brands that we know, whether it's UNH, Notre Dame, BC. So those are the ones where they're large. There's also rules around there. So they're allowed to have scholarships, right? And full rides and all of that. Division 2, there's a little bit more restrictions on scholarships. So there's not as many full ride scholarships. A lot of them are more half scholarships. So Southern New Hampshire University, St. Anselm's, those are your Division 2 schools that we know in our area.
Yeah.
And then you have Division 3. Division 3, there is no scholarships allowed. So any financial aid you get is based off of you as a student, and athletics is an extension, it's like an extracurricular activity.
Yeah.
So St. Joe's is Division 3. Right down the road, New England College, I believe, is Division 3. Yeah. So no one on there should be getting any sort of financial aid for the sport that they play. They can get merit scholarships, but it has to be based off of them as a student. Not as every now Division 3 is also where in Division 2 is where you get the most parity. So for example, Bates is considered Division 3. Bowdoin is considered Division 3. So Tufts, I ran against Tufts. So you're talking about some pretty prestigious schools offer Division 3, and part of that's because of their philosophy. They don't want athletics to be the sole reason why you're there.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of people go. So I went to St. Joe's not to run cross country necessarily. I went there because I saw good programs that was available, and I could run cross country.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I get that.
And then in each division you have conferences. So that's where in Division 1 we have the AACC and SEC. Same thing. We were part of the GNAC, the Great Northeast Athletic Conference. I actually wrote a paper about that in college, and I met with the commissioner and talked about expansion and that kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's a lot different than in high school, where Division 3, we play every team in the state that's Division 3. You're part of a conference, and you run against your conference, and then you compete in your conference. So.
Okay, so one of the other questions I had for you is you went for a degree in history, right? But you're student teaching.
Yeah, so I actually started sport management. I was a sport management major my freshman in the beginning of my sophomore year. The business classes were kind of too much for me. And I felt honestly like, no offense to anyone who's going to be a business major, it just wasn't the right fit for me. I felt like I was wasting my money on those types of things. So I wanted to be a teacher. St. Joe's does not have a education, like secondary education degree. Most secondary education teachers, it's a minor, and your major is the subject that you're gonna go into. So I had a history degree, and then I have a minor in secondary education. And then luckily I had enough credits that I also have a second minor in sport management, with a focus on coaching.
Okay. So, what motivated you to start teaching, I guess?
So I come from a family of teachers, actually. My aunt's a teacher, my mom's a teacher. My mom's been teaching for 30-something years, almost 40 years. When I was out of school, like when I was a little kid and I didn't have school, my mom usually did because she worked at a prep school. So I would just go to school with her
Yeah.
and I would go walk around. I go and like other teachers, like the community aspect, right? Like I knew all of my teachers I had in high school, the majority of them saw me growing up because I was on campus as a little kid.
Yeah.
So like I would go over and I would watch Mr. Devon teach, pre-cal, or I would go up and watch Mr. Hancock teach history. It was that kind of a vibe. So I think just being around it enough. Teaching was always kind of a fallback career for me when I went into sport management. Um, and then eventually I realized, instead of making that the fallback career, let's make that our full-time career.
All right, so moving on. So talk about teaching, I'm sure a little bit more in coaching, but you talked about Frisbee. Let's talk about that first.
Yeah.
So what happened? You did ultimate Frisbee competitively, or was it Frisbee golf?
So no, ultimate Frisbee. So I don't play Frisbee golf.
Okay.
I don't. Both my brothers do though. One of my brothers is like close to even making like the US Open of disc golf. Ultimate Frisbee, I started in college. Group of us started playing like just on the quad, the classic, just like generic college guys.
Yeah.
I got, so medically, I was not allowed to run cross country anymore. I got PT, eventually got cleared to participate, in athletics. So I did like intramurals and stuff. Cross country, just the wear and tear on your body. I just couldn't do that anymore, but stop and go, I could, if that makes sense. I used to wear two like kind of knee braces, but I could. Eventually there was a local team, kind of cross country team that went on weekends to different tournaments and tried out and made it. And then when during the summer, I worked down back at my alma mater, Cushing, student like summer teaching down there in this program, kind of like what St. Paul's has, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
the SPS. And went over to Worcester, was competing in the league, put my name in there, got assigned to a team. So I'd play every like Tuesday and Thursday. And then that league put together like an all-star team that then went and competed against like top-notch kind of semi-pro teams.
Yeah.
And I got selected as like the last roster spot and eventually worked my way up into the rotation. So not to bore you with ultimate Frisbee slang, but I was like a defensive cutter. So I was on when you throw the disc, that's you pull.
Yeah.
I'm the guy on the line. So we're giving the disc to the other team. I was one of the people who gave the disc to the other team, if you will. And I was covering guys who were running down the field. I'm still pretty decent at throwing or handling. But I was my job was to get a tip. So like knock the disc out of the air and then run down the field towards our zone and towards our end. And they would usually give me a bid and I would dive for the disc and score a point for us. Like that was my one job. It's called the bookends, if you will, get a turnover and then get a point. That's what I did.
Yeah.
And that's why they selected me. So I played against some pretty top-notch guys. If we ever have if it ever becomes an Olympic sport, I competed against a couple of guys who would have made an Olympic team.
That's pretty cool.
I tried out for a professional team, made it through the first rounds of cut. I was covering the defending league MVP and skied him. So I grabbed the disc over him for a point during tryouts. And he did the same thing to me. And I'm 6'1". He's 5'10", 5'9", and he can jump. He can dunk a basketball. So I went up for the disc. His chest is at my head.
Jeez.
And he just ripped it from me. And Frisbee, ultimate Frisbee is also awesome because there's like a spirit of the game. There's no referees. And it's all about sportsmanship. So sometimes, in football, it's like, no, I caught the ball, I swear. In Frisbee, or in ultimate, you go for the disc. And if you drop it, you do fess up. You don't go, no, I did. So I swear, hey, check the replay. And if I catch it, but you think I didn't, and we can't agree, we just throw it when everyone stops where they are. You just throw the disc back to where the person handled it. You just reset. It's a fun sport, and I highly recommend anyone who's looking for some sort of competition, but lighthearted, play ultimate.
Okay. So, we'll go through, different schools you taught at and
Yeah.
coached at.
Yeah, so first job was Washington Academy. That's East Machias, Maine. I lived farther from my parents than my brothers did in Philly. That's how, yeah. Worked there for 1 year. I lived on campus, in a dorm of 12 kids. Coached basketball freshman, and I was a varsity assistant. We were the number 3 team in the state. Got upset the first round. We've talked before about how the crowd is nuts up there.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I think everyone should go to a Maine basketball tournament game. I really do. High school basketball up there is king. And then I coached baseball. Ended up at Windham, down in southern New Hampshire. Taught there for 3 years. Loved my time there.
Mhm.
Coached baseball for 2 years, basketball for 3 years. And then the spring of my last year there, I did an AAU basketball program, 6th grade team. And taught history during both those things, and then finishing up my 4th year here at Hopkinton. Coached you for 2 years in baseball.
Yep.
And then I coached basketball for 3 years. This is the first year I have not done any coaching, although Coach Chase, I might be working his camps this summer because
Okay.
there's an itch I got to scratch, Drew. So
Yeah. So, yeah, I want to get more into this. So let's talk about like, throughout teaching and coaching, mentors you've had and lessons you've learned.
So I'd say the first mentor I had as a coach was Jeff Smith. I think that was his name. Really bad if it's not his name, which was when I was in college. The guy, the Gray New Gloucester head coach, because he gave me my first shot at coaching, and he was a very brilliant baseball mind. And then at Washington, this guy Barry Terrell, who was the varsity basketball coach, and he also was in the history department. We had a common prep, so I'll go to his office and we would watch game film, and he taught me how to prepare for games. And then when I was at Windham, the Leo Gravel, former Windham coach, and Todd Stephanides, the former basketball coach there, both of them were incremental in making me the coach I am today.
Yeah.
I would say.
Okay. So you get to Hopkinton.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how you decided that, this was the spot that you wanted to teach at and you wanted to coach at, and like that whole process.
Yeah, the spring of 2019, I was engaged. My wife and I were planning on living in the Concord area. Concord's very far away from Windham. Concord's a very short way from both of where we both teach. And Hopkinton has a stellar reputation, so I took it as an opportunity to move, even though it was a lateral move in my career. It was to something that I felt was a better fit. And then coaching here, I was very lucky that I got here because they needed a social studies teacher, and they also needed a basketball and baseball coach. The kids here and the students are completely different than what I've had before. Very self-motivated, and I've been able to coach the way I want. You know me as I'm a tougher coach than other times. I always say Coach Merrill is different than Mr. Merrill.
I agree, and I feel like I can speak to that better than most people because I think I know you better as both a teacher and a coach than a lot of other people do.
Yeah, you're one of the few that I've had. You've basically had a whole day with me sometimes, right? So, I've always appreciated that parents, I feel like we're fairly supportive when I was here coaching, and that people listened to what I was saying, not how I said it. I definitely have gotten a little bit calmer. Part of it might be because of the kids, that I've been my children now. But that's been I've always enjoyed that I can be who I want to be here, and I don't have to act out anything. That makes sense.
Yeah. So I want to talk about like every season kind of briefly.
Yeah.
But like your first year of basketball here. So that team, You cut me from the JV team. What happened?
Hey, me and Sigma, you're asking pre-COVID. You think I remember that? I just remember being in my apartment that year, but no, I don't. We had 12, 14 spots on JV, and I think you were the 15th or 16th. And that's the toughest part about being a coach.
Mhm.
The two worst days of coaching is, in my opinion, is tryouts and awards, because you're going to tick off somebody. You're
Yeah.
going to hurt somebody's feelings.
Mhm.
Whether it is a player who they think should be on varsity and you put them on JV, or a player who you think should be making the JV team that you don't think is the right fit at the time. And that's I would have had the opportunity to coach you in baseball, but COVID, so we didn't have that opportunity. Plus your outside shot, man, you got to work on that. But that was, I think that's always been the toughest thing. And actually, my first year here was the first time I ever had to make decisions. Before, your varsity coach, when you're at the larger schools, the varsity coach kind of sets all the rosters and will kind of be the one
Yeah.
who talks to people. Plus, you're doing multiple rounds cuts. Get to a smaller school, it's a lot more personable. So when I was at Windham, you could cut a kid, and you're not going to see them the rest of the year. Where I saw you the next day.
Yeah.
And that's always tough. And that's kind of the tough part of teaching in the building that you coach as well.
So yeah, what was that team like that first year, and then COVID at the very end of it?
Well, I remember. I
I think
remember
COVID happened like right after the season.
So the COVID hit actually the week that the championship game would have been.
Mhm.
We lost in the semifinals that week to Guilford. The varsity. The JV, I can't remember our record, but I remember it wasn't necessarily. I think we finished 500. I just remember JV. I remember realizing how much different a small school type of basketball was. I went from coaching a Division II, then Division I team, where you had a freshman game and then a JV game and then a varsity game too. Oh, we're the first game of the night. Oh, okay. So that was very much different. And then that varsity team was a very talented team. We just came up short against a very, very good Guilford team. That was the first year of Guilford's eventual, 4 years in a row.
Yeah.
So, just didn't have enough, which story of the game. So
then we have COVID, no baseball season.
Right.
And then the next year you have that whole COVID situation where you're playing against D2 schools and getting that good experience and go to the championship, lose to Guilford.
Yep.
In a close game. Was that one of the toughest losses of your coaching career?
It was the toughest game that I was a part of. Not in my coaching career, because I was just an assistant.
Yeah, but still, I'd say.
Oh, it was heartbreaking. I cried. I remember I went. My wife she got one of my tickets, because we had 4 tickets each.
Yeah.
And I found her and I cried. I literally cried in her arms, on the court. And I remember that being tough. So we that was a tough loss. Not the worst loss that I've ever had. When I think it was at Windham multiple times that my last year there. I've had buzzer beaters beat me. I've had half court buzzer beaters. I've had fadeaway threes into the stand buzzer beaters. Those have been tougher. In baseball, I've lost to a walk-off. And that so those have been tougher, but that's because it's my team. And I'm the head coach and I'm the face of it. But that championship game, I remember just that locker room was emotional. So the energy of that game was definitely the tough part.
Okay. So then you move on, we have this baseball season, and that's the first time I really got to know you.
Yeah, and we won 2 games?
One game. Kearsarge.
Yep. Yeah, that was eye-opening for me. So Windham's a baseball town. I think I only lost 4 or 5 games over 2 seasons there. And then we came here, and the challenge was changing my expectations to, And we said it all the time, right? One, it's a great day for baseball.
Yep.
Just be thankful we have a chance to play today. But two, the score doesn't matter. What are we doing? And that team incrementally got better over the course of the season.
Oh, absolutely.
And I remember it was originally just teaching you guys, hey, like when you get the ball, this is where you're supposed to throw it. To seeing that that was no longer the focus. It was now actually talking about the situations and when we should be, when we should take a first to third versus not. And so, like, beginning of the season was just how to lay a bunt down.
Mhm.
End of the season, it was actually when to lay a bunt down. And that was always, I would say that season was one of the proudest seasons I've ever had as a coach. Because it was also like still COVID is hitting. So it was just like, guys, just be thankful we have a chance to play today. And I felt like the energy of that team was it was the most fun I've ever had on a 1 in like 14 team.
Wow.
Because I don't think we ever cared about the losses. And that was always fun. We had a couple of heartbreakers, the Merrimack Valley game. That was a tough one. But that I generally thought we had a good time that season. And,
Yeah.
And that was awesome.
I would agree. And it was good to kind of really get to know who you are as a coach.
Yeah.
So, and then you invited me to join basketball as the manager the following winter, and that was pretty cool of you to do. I had a lot of fun with that, and I learned a heck of a lot from you, Signor, and I appreciated the opportunity to get there and learn kind of the coaching aspect of it and be a part of the Hopkinton basketball family, if you will, as you've been.
Yeah, and then you did some games, like I think you started calling the girls games, right?
Yeah.
And then this past year, you've done a lot more of that, up in the booth
Broadcasting,
kind of a thing. And so I think it's been fun to see, you're a good example of exploring that there's more to games and to sports than just the athletes themselves, right? And that you can keep a career in athletics. Like I grew up my entire life being a sports fan. You can grow up you can still be involved your entire career than just being someone who watches sports. Be involved in many different ways. So
I've enjoyed that. I don't think I would have been able to get where I'm at right now without you, because you helped me from baseball to being able to be on varsity this year. And a lot of that work that went into that was taught by you, and motivation I gained was by you, and saying, hey, I got the self-esteem to do this or that came from you.
well, thank you.
I appreciate that. And then also kind of developing that relationship with the basketball team has meant a lot to me and given me a lot more opportunities.
Hey, I've said it before, it's all you. I was just the guide. No, it's awesome.
Yeah, but yeah, it's been awesome to have you as a coach, and likewise as a teacher, and definitely been a very impactful mentor for me. So.
Thank you. And I look forward to continuing to maybe hop on here again, and we can debate the future of the Celtics and the Red Sox and the Bruins. So awesome.
All right. Thank you, Coach.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. That was good.